So what is it they're calling it these days? Trigger warning? Do you know the origin of the word faggot? It doesn't really mean gay, and gay men can be gay without being faggots, and straight men can be faggots without being gay. First, it meant kindling, the small pieces of wood used to start a fire. In Britain, they began to call cigarettes faggots, or fags, and in boarding school, the bigger kids would push around the smaller or wimpier kids in the dominance hierarchy and take their fags. The kids that didn't stand up for themselves and would be killed off early if it wasn't for the rule of law then became synonymous with faggots. Delicate guys. This is proof that gender isn't just a social construct, like some people are trying to claim. You can't just decide to be a woman any more than some delicate pussy can decide to be a man. Being a man takes work. Being a man takes courage and discipline and the will to face unrelenting hardship to provide for and protect your family. You can't just turn it on or off. If you recall my earlier stories about Ginger, she told me once that the reason she treated me so badly was, simply, that I let her. I was weak, so she pushed me around. I've noticed since then that women have a low tolerance for men who care too much about appearing non-threatening. Males who do any of the things we were told in the 90s that we had to do don't really blow women's skirts up. I can't speak for everyone, but the reasons I was weak were, apart from my upbringing, the bombardment in high school and college of this bizarre and very unsexy morality. I was told that I had to ask specific permission to touch a girl here or here and couldn't escalate the passion naturally. This programming my generation was subjected to made a lot of us go overboard trying to assure girls we were non-threatening. It gave a lot of girls no choice but to look for abusive men to be dominant with them. Hold your knee-jerk righteous indignation for a moment while I explain. You've made it this far. We're doing what our society has taught us to do, trying to appeal to women's emotions, be supportive and comforting, behaving in ways that modern women say they want us to, and we're being rebuffed because, while women may say this is exactly what they want, they don't. Discussing feelings, especially, is the very thing that'll turn women off, no matter how much they claim to want it. Nobody wants a faggot. You absolutely must be the leader or she'll ditch you for someone who is, even if he just seems to be. I have two Facebook friends who I met in my restaurant on their honeymoon, who are now divorced. One is Danish, the other Finnish, and they looked like the perfect Viking couple. Both had long blonde hair, great posture, impeccable manners. He has a long manly beard and collects swords. He even goes to a sword club and practices with others, trying to keep the masculine warrior tradition alive. The problem is he's a pussy. She started cheating, privately and then openly, shaved her head, started dressing like a man, and divorced him. Instead of Helena, her name, she now goes by he. But why? I can only speak from what I've been told by both of them and what I've seen that they publish online. His Facebook posts are often lengthy complaints about his being mistreated by someone, and he's quick to condemn any kind of masculine behavior. For example, even saying good morning to a woman you don't know is verbal assault. There was a several-hour video circulating a few years ago wherein a woman walked around Manhattan being filmed by someone walking ahead of her. They kept account of all the people who said hello to her, or how you doing, or anything at all. These were called verbal assault. Now, some of them were catcalling, sure. Some were rude. A few of them even got aggressive, but a lot of them did not. Calling every instance verbal assault is silly, especially when the same people who condemn speaking to a woman also defend Joe Biden for groping little girls and kissing women on the back of their necks after just meeting them. She was verbally assaulted 108 times, notably by males dressed in a manner inconsistent with working men on their lunch break, so I don't consider them representative of men in general. But the makers of the video claimed it demonstrates how toxic men are. Not just lower income men, not just trash, but all men. We were all tarred with the same brush. Someone made a rebuttal video wherein a male walked the streets and got the same catcalls from other men and also women. While discussing the video and all the claims made regarding it, the Dane condemned the video's excursionism and the man's putting harassment in quotations as Class A douchebaggery, saying that no matter what, catcalling is unacceptable. While I may not like catcalling, I have to disagree. First of all, unacceptable to you is not unacceptable to someone else, as evidenced by the fact that the most important people in this case are women, and with the exception of a minority, they not only accept it, they approve. I'll mansplain in just a second. In the meantime, we can use him as the case in point. His wife left him. His following relationships all had an unhappy ending. Now he cites the catcalling woes of his girlfriend who lives in New York, and I have yet to tell him that if he lives in Denmark and she lives in New York, she's not his girlfriend. Those assholes on the street, however, tend to have at least one girl in their lives. I'm seeing a lot of guys, especially forgettable white guys, shouting in public over the plight of women and minorities as a way to ingratiate themselves and possibly get laid. Outrage is trendy nowadays, and it has a low ability threshold, so anyone can scream and insult people for the cell phone cameras, hoping to become famous on YouTube. It has started an epidemic of one-upmanship, males trying to outdo one another in their defense of the victim du jour with the hope of standing out in the herd. Unfortunately for them, the girls they try to impress are being turned off by that defense and looking to each other for sexual companionship. Now, remember what I said about life imitating art? This is a perfect example. For decades, we in the West have been programmed by film and television to accept the inversion of masculine and feminine roles. Have you noticed many male characters have become Homer Simpson? A bunch of hapless nitwits who succeed only by accident, while a female lead saves the day. People have come to believe in that, to the great detriment of our culture. I'm going to quote one of my experiences from Memoirs of a Swine Volume 2 because it mystified me for years until now. Esmeralda opened a tab for me at the bar and handed me the first of many drinks, and the next few hours were a happy blur. As it got dark, she went back into the back and came out with a pile of clothes, dumping them onto the floor. "What's that?" I asked Todd. "This," he said, "is ladies' night, and that is our wardrobe. 3 Quetzal Cubas and screwdrivers for guys if you put on one of those dresses." "Are you serious?" He nodded, eyes wide. "You won't believe how much fun it is. Go pick out a dress." I went skeptically over to the pile of clothes, looking from it to Esmeralda, and she nodded. "Go ahead." It was a bunch of cheap, trashy dresses from the Paca, out behind the market where the poorest people get their clothes. And these dresses looked like they were destined for the cheap whorehouses on the outskirts of town. I chose the trashiest dress of them all and went into my dorm to change. Shaking my head at my reflection in the mirror, I chuckled and went back out onto the courtyard. I was met with cheers and whistles and catcalls. All of the guests, boys and girls alike, were laughing, and they went looking for their dresses right away. Esmeralda had to tell the girls, no, sorry, it was for boys to wear only. It was amazing. Right up until then, the hostel was filled with guys that were affecting unfriendliness by macho posing, making sure everybody knew they were absolutely not gay. And too cool for this place. Then they put on the dresses, and boom, it was gay pride night in Jungle Party. Strangers sidled up to me at the bar saying, "Hey sailor, what ship are you from? You want to buy a girl a drink, stud muffin?" Man, it was hilarious. The place came alive in no time. At 8, that's when London Todd announced the dance-off. We had to dance as badly as we could to very gay songs, and 3 chicks were chosen out of the crowd to be judges. The 3 girls sat on the floor with their backs to the bar, looking up at all of us idiots dancing to the village people for a bottle of cheap rum. I had a good time, and then I was a little shocked at this one guy, a muscular brute, who went up to the chick with the short hair, who I was convinced was a lesbian. He braced his legs wide, putting his crotch right in her face to gyrate and make her squeal with shame and disgust, and we all just stopped and stared with mouths agape. The other 2 judges screamed as loudly as the poor girl, and that only encouraged the guy. He planted one foot up on the front of the bar to get his junk even closer, and I was sure he was rubbing himself against the tip of her nose. When the music stopped, we all went back to our drinks and the judges conferred. A few seconds later, London Todd announced, "We have a winner!" And the 3 girls unanimously declared the muscular brute Jungle Party dancing champion. I was really shocked then. Seriously? But I thought that stuff was reprehensible. I learned a lot about people in that moment. I'll go ahead and tell you that for the next few weeks, I danced in every ladies' night dance-off, and this happened every time. No kidding. A guy would do this, and every girl judge that was disgusted by it ended up voting for him. If this book was fiction, my character would then try it himself and fail miserably and be looked on with the disgust you would think all the other guys should have been. And I would rail about how unfair it was and blah blah blah, but it's not. And I never did it because there are some things I just don't do. The undeniable fact, though, is that that beast of a man always went on to sleep with one of the girls there. And I think it's because, on a deep level she wouldn't admit to herself, she was turned off by the men in dresses. The overcompensation, the toxic masculinity of the dance champion was necessary for her to be aroused. It doesn't matter if you find it acceptable if it's true. The incel rebellion and the majority of serial killers are comprised of males who are resentful of women for not sleeping with them. Perhaps no one ever explained to them what it is about them that makes them undesirable. Whenever women are approached by interested males, they are evolutionarily hardwired to size them up and judge whether they're potential mates. Is this the man who will keep me safe during the zombie apocalypse and I should repopulate the world with afterward? They often don't realize that's what they're thinking, but they are. That's why they'll repeatedly test men even long after they've chosen to be with them. If you haven't heard of this, you can look it up as shit test. But since I find that term unintellectual and vulgar, we'll continue referring to it as simply testing. One subtle way they'll test is by asking, when they see that he likes a certain song, "Oh my God, you actually like this? Like, oh my God, right? Ew." Maybe they don't have anything against the song at all. It's his reaction that they're looking for. Will he, in an effort to avoid admitting to like something that she hates, pretend he doesn't like it? If so, he lacks the spine to stand up for himself and is no longer worthy of her time. She'll lose respect for him. The only correct answer is, hell yes, I like it. What, you don't? We are in an age right now where males are programmed to please women at our own expense, and I do not see that as something women should be blamed for. It's an artificial way to weed out unworthy men and prevent them from passing on their genes. Unfortunately, those males can become resentful and have access to guns. I'll get back to that a little later. It's up for debate that is why so many white women are turning to darker men for love. I've heard Dr. Jordan Peterson say that there's an inherent attraction for that totalitarian male dominance that feminists have chased out of the West. The more women scream for equality, the more their unconscious longs to be dominated. While many would like that not to be true, I'd like to cite the evidence one cannot deny, namely, porn analytics. Since porn is the #1 internet industry, there are people who analyze it and take notice of what people search for. It's been found that people overwhelmingly search for weird porn, which means that there's no normal. While women search significantly less for porn than men do, search rates for porn featuring violence against women are at least twice as common among women than men. Sophia Rahman wrote a great article for Vice.com in May of 2017, "Why Are So Many Women Searching for Ultra-Violent Porn?" I'll paraphrase. If there is a genre of porn in which violence is perpetrated against women, my analysis of the data shows that it almost always appeals disproportionately to women, wrote Dr. Seth Stevens-Davidowitz, a former Google data scientist, based on his study of access to Pornhub's search and views data. The results are in. About 25% of straight porn searches by women are for videos featuring violence against other women. 5% are for non-consensual sex. Rahman asked, but why are so many women so keen to see videos tagged with, say, painful anal crying, public disgrace, or extreme brutal gangbang, or content marked as forced or rape? The feminist porn movement, one focusing on equality and empowerment, might be thriving, but the data shows proportionally that women are also consuming much more of the most extreme misogynistic sexual material available online. Researchers from Notre Dame and University of North Texas let 355 young women listen to erotic rape fantasy and investigated how aroused they became. 52% of them had fantasies about forced sex with a man, 32% about being raped, and 28% about being forced to perform oral sex on a man. Overall, 62% of the women reported having had at least one fantasy around a forced sex act. First, I ought to say that the test subjects reported being less repressed about sex, open to fantasies in general, more likely to have consensual fantasies, and had high self-esteem. So the assumptions one might make that they were not the ideal test subjects have already been taken into consideration. They're fine. They're more or less normal. In the fantasy, the male is strongly attracted to the female character. He expresses his desire for sex, but she's unresponsive. She continues to refuse his advances until he overpowers and rapes her. She resists throughout and at no time gives consent, but somehow experiencing gratification from it. You would think they were repulsed by it, but just like the brute on ladies' night, they ate it up. Like Esther Perel says, most of us will get turned on at night by the very same things that we'll demonstrate against during the day. The erotic mind is not a very politically correct one. I'm absolutely not saying to act this way, like the brute or any of the actors in these porn videos. What I'm saying is, act like men, instead of a bunch of pussies, so that girls don't have to go to this extreme in their search for a mate. And how do you act like a man? First, take control of your mind. Do not be one of those people who throw a fit and then later, instead of apologizing, say, "I was upset." Do not be my father, getting revenge on his bully from 50 years ago by beating up his children today. When I catch myself revisiting a memory that I know will lead to anger, one of those neural pathways I created long ago, I have found that my mind can be called back with exercises like these. 1. Pick a word or phrase that'll bring you back to the present. It can be something like bananas. Whatever you want. Mine is the one you feed, to remind me of the 2 wolves that made the rounds on Facebook a few years ago. 2. Take 3 deep breaths with 6-second exhales. Concentrate on your breathing. 3. Look around and notice things. A tiny plant growing heroically out of a crack in the pavement. A cobweb in the corner. Then try to imagine that you're not standing in a room or on a street, but on the surface of an enormous rock, spinning around a gigantic ball of flaming gas, which are, in fact, quite small. Number 4, your posture affects the way you feel and your level of confidence. Timid, unsexy people try to make themselves smaller as if they're hiding. They hunch over, cross their arms, look down, and keep their feet together. As unpopular as manspreading may be, it's a sign of confidence. I'm not advising anyone to do it, just to understand it. Stronger people don't try to hide. Imagine you have a light coming out of your sternum, and it's a light you have to let all the world see. When people are confident, they hide that light. When people aren't confident, they hide that light by hunching over and rounding their shoulders, trying to protect it. Every time I catch myself doing that, I do a triumphant pose with my arms outstretched and my back arched. Just stand there with my arms outstretched and my head back, like the end of 300 when Leonidas embraces the falling hail of arrows. Do that, the power pose, and you will change your attitude and maintain your composure no matter what happens. Try not to do it in public, though. You'll look like a fruitcake. Now, finally, the point of this book, the hero mindset. What is it you really like about James Bond? He's cool in that he's non-reactive in times of danger, and he gets the job done in record time without complaining. There's really nothing he can't do. And how is this possible? Simple. He works hard. You don't see it in between scenes where he's thwarting the villain and getting to the girl. They don't bother to show you that part because it's not sexy. But what he's doing is practicing all the things he'll need to do. That isn't some raw talent that he just happened to have. The stars were not aligned just right when he was conceived, so he was born a card shark, dancer, and genius of improvisational violence. And women don't love him because he just happened to get bitten by a radioactive love spider. Everything he knows he will have to do, not just for the mission, but throughout life in general, he trains for. He dresses very well, has good conversation skills, speaks a variety of languages, and has a wide range of competence, all of which can be learned, and these days easily and inexpensively. I got my education on style from Pinterest. For a little while, I followed a Turkish model named Tufanir and bought good quality cloth from the wholesalers to be made into suits and outfits by local tailors. That way, they fit me perfectly. When I lived in Orlando, all the guys wore the same thing. Shorts, flip-flops, t-shirts, and baseball caps. And you know what? They were a bunch of douchebags. If you want to look like them, go right ahead, but don't complain about the class of girl who settles for you. Conversation skills? I cannot recommend Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, enough. Best book I've ever read, aside from 48 Laws of Power. When I'm king, those two will be required reading for all of my subjects. About the languages, really, speaking a different language isn't that hard. Just think of it as a different way to say something. That's all it is. And as the world gets smaller, a lot more people are becoming multilingual. Here's a joke, by the way. What do you call someone who speaks many languages? Multilingual. What do you call someone who speaks 2 languages? Bilingual. What do you call someone who speaks only 1 language? An American. You want to be that guy, the butt of other countries' jokes? Or do you want to be the one who hooks up with a smoking hot Venezuelan chick at the club, or doesn't get his ass kicked by the Mexicans down at the 2 a.m. taco cart? You can at least learn a little bit of everything like I did. It really opens doors for you, just showing people that you tried. Something that bugs me about tourists anywhere I go, they all start speaking English to the locals. In my restaurant, even if they are not native English speakers, they'll assume that Chapin waiters understands English and start yakking away and then complain later that they weren't understood. Honestly, buy a frickin' phrase book. Don't assume that speaking pidgin English counts as speaking Spanish. Every day, someone starts speaking English to a local and gets annoyed that no one understands them. And stop asking people if they speak English. If they came up to you in your country and asked if you spoke Spanish, you'd laugh at them. I've seen it. Competence. There are these myths that abound regarding how black people can automatically dance and gays inherently have good taste. In reality, it has nothing at all to do with the color of your skin or sexual preference. It's just that, stereotypically, people of certain persuasions have certain interests and pursue them. Latin and black people know the importance of dance, so they study and practice it. Remember what I said about the mating rituals in the club? Dancing matters. When I was in middle school, I'd be standing in the lunch line behind black girls who were practicing dance moves right there. I realized that was why they always seemed to know how to do it, because they actually did. It wasn't a mystery to them like it was to my friends and me, who would never have thought to talk about it, much less practice amongst ourselves. Check this out, I did this last night. You know the part where it goes, ba-ba-da-ba-doom? How about we go like this? And they tried it a couple times until they had it down pat, and I had to admit, it looked pretty good. Gay guys in general have style because they care about it and pursue the development of good taste. They go to fashion shows and read books and magazines and interviews with the people they admire. They take an interest and develop it. Therefore, James Bond would have had to devote a lot of time and effort to the perfection of all his skills in order to use them flawlessly when the occasion demanded. But he's a fictional character. So, there are plenty of men who aren't and who are sweeping your dream girl off her feet at this moment while you're busy practicing what? Beer pong? Watching sports? Let me go off on another rant here for a second. Over 100 years ago, H.G. Wells published a book that inspired a few of the ways we're kept stupid. People in power who read that book built temples all over the world to replace churches, temples where people would worship men instead of gods. Instead of caring about world events, people would devote much of their lives and identities to the study of men who play games that children are expected to grow out of. No one back then believed it was possible. It was just another of H.G. Wells's fantasies like lasers, atomic bombs, and email. In his book, the men rode horses, raced chariots, fought, and played competitive games of skill, and the dull, cowardly, and base came in thousands to admire and howl and bet. In short time, the men degenerated fast enough into a sort of athletic prostitute, with all the defects, all the vanity, trickery, and self-assertion of the common actor, and with even less intelligence. This was from A Modern Utopia by H.G. Wells. When a male's manhood has been taken away, he projects it onto others, living vicariously through their struggle, taking pleasure in their triumphs so that he can feel better about his own defeat. He'll strip to the waist and paint himself in the colors of a city he's never visited. In some countries, he'll travel in packs with other males, like dogs, and viciously attack people who wear the colors of their rival team. But ask him to stand up to the men in power who murdered his neighbors in staged massacres or justify further trampling of their rights, never gonna happen. Which brings me to the next of James Bond's skills. Learn how to fight. You absolutely must be capable of defending yourself and your mate. If not, she'll find someone who is, and rightfully so. That ridiculous claim going around the internet now of real men don't use violence, it's a crock. If you do not have the power to kill or do harm, you will always be subject to those who do. I cite the examples of Hitler, Stalin, Mao, and Pol Pot, all confiscating everyone's guns before killing over 13, 20, 45, and 2 million people, respectively. They couldn't have done it before. I do need to point out, though, that while the ability to defend yourself is necessary, there's a very old saying you must heed. Jesus said that the meek will inherit the earth, but that's actually a mistranslation. Of course it is. Because the meek will inherit squat. The real word is people who have swords but know when to keep them sheathed. Everyone else, pricks who resort to violence at the drop of a hat, are not covered in that statement. You need to choose your battles wisely. In movies that cater to the lowest common denominator, the hero is often someone who loses something, like his entire family, and comes back to kill all the bad guys by himself. It isn't original and it isn't much of a plot, but people eat it up because they love justified violence. But let's be fair. They do not care about the justice of it. They want to see killing. They will then contrive reasons to justify their own violence against someone else, such as anyone who commits the heinous sin of slowing them down in traffic. I believe an example of the violence women will approve of can be seen in the screenings of 2 films, The Passion of the Christ and Avengers Endgame. The year Passion came out, Mel Gibson made it available for prisoners to watch on Easter Sunday. I saw it and was just blown away. But the real surprise came when a stunned guard came up to me to tell me the audience reaction over on the women's side of the prison. He said that in the Gethsemane scene, when the Lord was being tempted by Satan and a snake slithered across the ground toward him, the crowd went wild when Jesus stood up and stomped on its head. The women were screaming with such ferocity that the guards were afraid of a riot. Avengers I saw first in the cinema and then on bootleg DVDs to see how other audiences reacted. Every time when Thanos was bashed in the head by Mjolnir, there was a collective gasp, everyone wondering who beside Thor could have thrown it. A joyful shout drowns out all sound when it boomerangs back to Captain America's fist. But why? Cap is so square, right? Sure, Chris Evans did a great job playing the character, and the writers wrote him well, yada yada yada. The important thing is that, like Jesus, Cap is a righteous man. He may still be stuck in the 1940s with some of his habits, but the howl of the crowd says it all. He is the kind of man who is not just worthy of wielding Mjolnir. During the Ultron after party a few movies back, when everyone was trying to lift the hammer, he could do it and pretended he couldn't so Thor wouldn't look bad. If you want the women, then, you must become not just a strong man, but a righteous one. The first of those I have tips for. My advice for the second is this. Imagine that you're the hero of your own movie. All day, every day, whatever you do is being watched by an audience of millions. How do you want them to see you? As someone they'll stand up and cheer, or a loser they'll be disgusted by? About strength, I mean more than the obvious getting in shape. You need a strength of character and discipline. I know that's a big turnoff because it implies work, but luckily I have a shortcut for that too. I see men buying testosterone supplements because they think a pill will make them more masculine, and it's ridiculous. You don't need to buy something your body makes naturally. All you have to do to raise your level is stop masturbating. If you satisfy yourself, you lose the motivation to succeed. If you short-circuit your natural urge to excel in life and thereby attract mates, there's nothing to fight for. Have you ever had the kind of orgasm where you're so relaxed afterward that nothing's important? Nothing could ever bother you? To me, it feels like my fire's been put out. I've imagined it as if there's a plant growing out of my penis with its roots going all throughout my body, and that plant was my vitality, and that all of it has been pulled out of me, roots and all, leaving me spent and useless. Well, I have a sneaky suspicion that great men don't like that. They probably never masturbate and hate that feeling of complete satisfaction. The downside is, if you never do it at all or never have sex, your testosterone will naturally decrease. So what I do is boost my testosterone by touching myself in the shower after working out and stop right before orgasm. It may sound awful, but the feeling of power that comes over me in the next moment is definitely worth a few seconds of frustration. My mind gets sharper, my will gets stronger, and it seems that that is when my pheromones come out in force. I think so because if I do it 3 days in a row, I always hook up with someone. Girls seem to approach me more than when I'm sated. Perhaps my pheromones are working overtime, or perhaps they see the alertness in my eyes. Whatever it is, it works. My productivity goes up, I get a lot more assertive, more confident, perhaps confrontational, but very definitely masculine. I don't know if this would work for women, but I have a feeling that it would have a similar result. It's a great way to build self-esteem because you can see it work immediately to your benefit, which is useful in our culture of instant gratification. Of course, the audience of my life movie are off getting popcorn during that scene. Yours should be too. 2 other things you can do to practice self-discipline are: put an object on top of your television, put on your favorite show, and for 5 minutes, watch the object instead of the show. If you even so much as glance down at the screen, you have to start over. And the second is more useful in today's world. Read the comments on politically oriented Facebook threads, especially the controversial ones. Read all the hateful comments trolls are writing, all the things you know in your heart are wrong, and resist the urge to respond. Don't tell them how stupid they are, or question their ancestry, or any of that. Just realize that it doesn't affect you at all, and then get your ass back to work.